kind of a film, you require Malayalam, you require some knowledge of those art forms of Kerala, so which I am not familiar with. For example, if you mention about that Kalamandali, if you are Malayali, you know that what it meant, what kind of institution is that, what kind of a powerful institution in Kerala and so on. So those kinds of nuances, the meanings of the specific context, I don't know. So that is why I am not going into those details, into those cultural forms and folk songs and performances and so on. I am hoping that it would do that. I would like to respond more as a kind of a non-Malayali outside reader looking at this kind of a documentary in the context of other documentaries, other attempts made in terms of thinking of the Dalit and caste and their identity politics and so on. So if you compare that, it is uncomparable. In the sense, it's excellent when compared to any one of the number of documentaries that have come in the last 10 years. I watched all of them. I'm sure Madhu and Untouched India or Dandora, Mahadiga, and several other films which are basically set in some kind of human rights framework, and the main attempt to somehow anthropologize the Dalit in terms of they have this culture, and they work with cattle, dead cattle, they work with some music, they have a drum, but basically freezing them in some kind of a glorious kind of past. So you really don't have the critical energy that this particular documentary has. So I have only 2 points that I want to focus. One point is about the obvious point that the film is making about caste discrimination. The fundamental human rights point that it's making, but it's making in a very, very different way that it's making. So that is one point, that the shift from caste discrimination to something called humiliation. So which is a very interesting kind of an issue that he is raising. Then the other issue, for me more important issue, I think if the series follows, so my suggestion is that you follow the other aspect of the film, not actually the human rights angle, which is already known and demonstrated well. The other aspect of the cultural creativity of this community, the cultural resources of this community, and the kind of innovative attempts these communities are doing in the domain of modernity. So that I think is a very, very interesting. That's the second issue that I want to talk about. So the first issue, that you have these institutional sites of Kerala, Kalamandalam, and if you just click on the net and see what kind of an institution, it's such an amazing kind of a powerful kind of an institution, which is supposed to be a Gurukula kind of a place, and you can see what is the situation of the Dalits in that kind of institution. It's selling those experiences of Dalits in those sites. And then you have examples like the youth festival. So what happens in those kind of situations, what kind of discrimination. In fact, those of us who are in the educational institutions, so these experiences are not new. And in fact, we have been reading suicides of Dalit students in the best of the institutions. So in some sense, not selecting them, not giving them kind of attention required, not teaching them, not giving them marks. And this is something that we know. But only thing is that he takes at another site to show you a similar kind of trajectory of this discrimination happening and so on. And the temple and the festival, big festivals and temples, within that you have these communities who are well trained and very skilled and very creative kind of people in traditional arts, and you can see what their kind of experiences that they have been going through. And then in the school and what kind of schooling that you have been. So all the resources of the Dalit children, that whether they dance for film songs, whether they do all kinds of things, is completely, this is all not recognized as valid. So you have to be, in fact, all our middle class parents send our children to classical dance and some Bharatanatyam and so on, because these are supposed to be the skills that you require when you go to a public school. So we know your school, and that school recognizes those kinds of what. So what if the child is from a particular kind of colony, where you have the football, where you have cinema poster, where you have Chiranjeevi, where you have all that, and where you have a drum. So it's kind of a complex kind of a colony, which is seen as a very stigmatized kind of a space. A space where only crime is possible, where criminals are produced, not creative kind of art. So that kind of a child, and what happens to the child when that child goes to the school, that is yet another kind of side. Then for me the most interesting section in this film is the last section of the folk performer kind of thing, and the way she replied to the other person about that reinventing the folk and in a modern context. So how does it matter that you have to be, you belong to the folk domain, you have to be in that domain, like saying the earlier documentaries, that you have to be in a folk dress when you are singing a folk song. So obviously, so the claims of the Dalits are not about the past, about present in the modern context. So she will reappear differently. Her name is, I think, Shailaja and Prasita and Shailaja. So their claim is entirely kind of different. So this is one kind of an aspect where so really see that the cultural politics of the Dalits are not about past, not about inventing a kind of a long history. That especially some of the critics now talk about the civilizational contribution of Dalits, civilizational past. So it is not so much about the civilizational of past, it is so much about the reinventing that past in the present context to make claims, to actually think of not just discrimination. The caste discrimination is something that we have been talking about, in that we have been experiencing in terms of what happens in the village, what happens outside, what happens in the school and so on. And in fact, but what is the humiliation from there to humiliation? Humiliation is something that it's much more than caste discrimination. In fact, it drives you to think of committing a suicide. If you look at that person, that it simply is not discrimination. Discrimination is obviously, you know, that you are not supposed to enter that domain. The humiliation is something that where you are allowed, you are invited, you are part of this. I'm part of the mainstream, but at the same time that you made to feel in such a way that you are not fit there, and you have to commit suicide. So this experience of a modern middle class kind of a Dalit is something that is very new. We always think about when you say, so what about the rights of the Dalit, so what happened in the village, what happened, whatever. So interestingly, the film shifts that direction. And another difficulty when you think of Kerala, because we went to Kerala in '96 to do this book. So the whole discussion was, is there anything Dalit in Kerala? Any discussion on Dalit? Is there caste? So there are modern people, communists and so on and so forth. So how to find Dalit writers there? It is so difficult to find a Dalit writer. We found some. And then the Dalit writers also, it is very difficult for them to point out how they are discriminated and so on. But it superbly, it has a kind of a domain of this cultural festival and this whole domain where you can really see that in a very graphic and convincing manner. Despite the communism, despite this land, Kerala, being such a kind of a heaven on earth, and you have this kind of a situation there. Then the other aspect, the second aspect, I'll take 2 more minutes, I'm sorry if I'm stopping. So the second aspect is about this community itself. In fact, you look at the entire discussion on history of Dalits, and as well as the academic debate on Dalits, and as well as the left engagement with the Dalits, or the rationalist engagement with the Dalits. So the problem is that there is some problem with the Dalits. So you have to become a citizen. You have to become a secular modern citizen. So you have this program called caste annihilation, that you have to annihilate caste. So out of an annihilate caste, that you really give up all the caste markers and so on, and then you become a modern citizen. The way the people who are dancing, the cinematic dancer boys, that's all. So they think what is wrong we want to wear, and the girl is saying. So they want to be modern that way. So that is supposed to be one way of annihilating caste and becoming a kind of a modern citizen and so on. So this has been something that has been told to us, and that is something that Dalits have also been experiencing and tried their way to actually come out of caste experience. But along the way, there is something that has been undermined. That these people have the cultural forms, performances, art, and so on. These people are completely, so when they say that they are communities of caste, it really doesn't mean that they are stigmatized and humiliated. Completely, whatever they have, those resources are resources which are untouchable. It is true that they are treated untouchable, but it is not true that they don't have any resources which are not untouchable. They don't have creativity. So their creativity, their life, their existence, entire thing has been stigmatized and completely suppressed. So this is where I think after the 90s, I noticed this in the literary kind of a sphere, where they are saying that it is not true, that yes, it is, but this mode of thinking of caste annihilation meant actually annihilating all this art, this wonderful art and creativity that we have seen. You have to annihilate that and say that you have to become somebody new. You have to learn what is that grammatically pure kinds of forms of classical dance, classical kinds of performance. You have to be trained into the kuchipudi and other kinds of examples that they have given. and all our resources are completely of no value. So this is something that there are two ways of thinking about it. So this point has been made by those who are thinking about there is an indigenous kind of culture, and these are communities of that kind of a society. So they have great resources. They are civilizational kind of advantages. But here the difference is that those civilizational resources anyway have not been of any use, because despite that you have done all this, despite that you have suppressed these communities for several years. So those the merit of the civilizational kind of past was never recognized in this country, because so you have invented different ways of suppressing those, stigmatizing those kinds of civilizational kind of resources. But the way that the Dalits want to approach is that it is very much in the domain of modernity. It is very much in the domain of modernity. You want to invent sport in a way that the girl was trying to invent. In a way that you want to be part of the youth festival. In a way that you want to be, in a way that in a colony you can have the football and the film poster and the English song and so on. So in a way that you cannot museumize Dalits by saying that you have a civilizational culture. I'll set up a museum. I'll keep you there. So this is something that this film is representing. Thank you.
Engage on this topic. So quickly, few points. One is that the idea of pure and impure in terms of understanding music. If you look at the audible present or the music scene in Kerala, in contemporary Kerala, always a kind of a scrutiny is being done to locate good and bad, or pure and impure. If you look at reality shows, the ways in which music is being discussed or music is being looked at, this question is always at the center. And then, not only this good or bad music or pure or impure are not are essentially connected with this idea of identities and body. No, the way in which what is good music and what is bad music also implicitly suggests that who can produce good music and who can't produce good music and who produces bad music. So this is the way in which looking at reality shows, youth festivals, and the idea of cinematic dance and all pulling to the center this particular idea. And again, this this is actually brought in this idea of looking at Chanda. Chanda is basically known as the Aksara Vadya, but you have this divine side where you have the bass. The bass side is considered to be the divine side, which is used in temples. But otherwise, the other side, the high pitch side, it is used as something for the Shingari, and that is considered to be the other of the melody. That's what Yeshudas is talking about. You have this music, which is the melody created by this pandits of and then you can't do it for what you call the working out or exercise and all. And that is considered to be those people who can produce this, and the other one still belongs to the people who are the elites or the people who can produce good music actually. So then again it is connecting with the idea of space. General Chola cannot produce music but crime. And then you look at the ways in which Satya has an interesting piece on A.R. Rahman. He talks about Mylapore Blues, one of his compositions he did for the Nokia. Then Mylapore, Madras Music Academy, Tanjavur, and these are the places you can, places that can produce good music. And whereas you have spaces belong to Dalits or the marginal people, they are all they can only create cacophonies without tal, without sangadi, tal, and all those things. Then the idea of contamination. You have cinematic dance. One point I wanted to emphasize is that you talk about the banning of cinematic music, cinematic dance in school youth festivals. You think that cinematic dance was there for years. It was not at all there. It didn't get an entry actually. It was not officially listed in the items of school youth festivals, but when it likely to get an entry, the state intervention. We have the history of Keshkar, the broadcasting minister, banning film music in areas broadcasting and all. And throughout this years, we have this problem with film music is something bad, and that's the same thing with the cinematic dance. Film music is not being listed in school youth festivals. You can't sing film music, and see, this is the way in which genres are identified with bodies and identity. And sound is closely connected with social and cultural identities that people belong to. Then, let me look at this concept of contamination, because this good music is always under the threat. Looking at reality shows going on, the classical pundits and all lamenting that we are losing this good pure music somewhere, and this all kinds of western, this cacophonies are coming and dominating. And see, this culprits are many, like A.R. Rahman, they are contaminating. They are doing all kinds of mixing, cutting, pasting, chopping, using samplers, all sorts of things which are not desirable in producing good music. These are some of the politics of production and representation of music in the larger culture field. This film is actually looking at not just as descriptive categories, but as bringing more theoretical possibilities. I'll stop here by posing this last one particular point. In fact, this notion of sound, because the visual is always attached or associated with the connection of the ways in which sound is associated and produced and make its own representation in different ways, and how these representations are connected to this idea of the practices or the cultures of listening. That is I think Ajit will be elaborating on this, basically this concept of shifting from enlightenment to ensoniment. He uses this concept of Jonathan Stern, and thanks for introducing Stern, bringing sound also to this center of cultural study, understanding, and looking at it as a major theoretical concern and possibility. Thank you.
So now, if you have any questions or something, but before that, I think Ajit will tell you a brief history of this film and why he is such kind of film.
I'll be more interested in discussion. The film what I approached is to create some possibilities of dialogue. So I will be more interested in dialogue and taking them on. So why I tried to do this film? I am a musician and a entertainer. So I have experienced dance in different forms in my musical life. So that's why I tried to do additional points of I have also tried to address the issue of sound in cultural field. So mostly we always talk about visibility. But audibility is not usually discussed. So I was trying how it's also important how we see cast and how we listen to cast, or how we hear cast, how cast is represented through the audible sign. So audio is also very important, and there's a lot of classification in sound. Loud noise is always connected with low cast, but the politeness or speaking in a low voice is considered as something as respected. So there's the context of sound. So this chanda is meaning loud noise, known as syllable. But inside this structure itself, we have two sides. One is loud and other is slow. So this cast is in music field we can't explicitly find cast as cast. It translates into some other thing. Maybe it's some form of sound we understand. So it is as well as I speak.
If you have some questions or comments.
Any questions? Could you explain the basic difference between Panchari and Shinkari Rag?
Panchari, they are associated with the temple art. So Panchari is basically temple art form. So Shingari was it evolved recently. It is played by low caste. Panchari is considered as classical form of Chanda.
So the values are assigned.
Yes. Because in youth school festival there is Chanda competition, but in manual it is not written that you should play Panchari. It's under turn. People follow that. We get praise only for Panchari. When we play Shingari, you know, praise.
I was just thinking, first of all, I want to confabulate you. It's kind of a wonderful visualization of the caste and sound in Kerala. But I also want to ask, why didn't you look into popular musical forms, like popular forms, like for instance, rock music and all that? Especially, when Aviel started performing, Rave magazine said they are the most politically and ideologically correct musical band that we have ever had in UK. So why didn't you look into those kind of? There are lots of experiments in that particular area in Kerala now. Have you looked into it?
It's the first part of music field. Okay. I will be doing different areas, and I have planned to do Western music field. So in the 70s, we had a very vibrant rock music culture in Kerala. Yeah. It has disappeared. I will be looking into this one again. I have planned to interview them. Later I will be doing this. This is the first part. So this is like an introduction.
There.
Thank you, Mr. Majid. I wanted to ask about the folk singer at the end, the lady who also pointed out about the style of dressing up and all that. For me, that was a very interesting tension, which is projected. I don't know whether you see it as a tension because she embodied politics. She said that folk is a form which is also talking of politics in a very interesting way. When the story continues, will you try to explore this kind of politics which is also conveyed through body styles, the type of engagement with the audience, the kind of sounds which are produced, vis-a-vis the attempt to make inroads into the classical form?
Coming part and be exploring specifically each part I will be elaborating in the coming part. There will be a part about folk music and how the body is used as a form of resistance. I will be doing that.
So is gender also going to be the outlook?
And there is another thing is that there's actually what there's a definition about folk. We don't know what folk. There's a problem with the definition of it. So how there's a problem with the classification also. How can we classify certain type of music as folk and some other forms as classical? So I will be exploring that particular. How we define different types of music.
So what would you consider folk and what would you consider classical?
doing that, it's a historical thing.
Yeah.
How a certain kind of music
Yeah.
came to be known as classical.
Yeah.
So Carnatic classical. So it's a historical thing. I'll be doing a part about that.
Forms have come to accept certain kind of Western intervention.
Yes.
Let's say even in the instruments and other style, even the places of conducting units have changed. So and production economies in the villages have changed. So what would be folk now? It was basically pastoral or agriculture related. Now that emphasis has gone. So what would you consider folk now? Or what would they call the Aprakash suits and this and that? Call a certain kind of music as folk. How they
I'll be exploring how
yeah.
certain forms of music are defined as folk. I'm doing that later.
This is like exploration.
I think both of
Again, this film was kind of an eye-opener for me because even after years of doing festival experience, the cast element in it registered to me only after. It registered to me only after watching this. Now, when I look back, I get a clear picture. We have had this experience where students were selected for dance forms because their skin complexion was darker than others. And yes, there is this notion of purity attached to who use sensual items. You are not supposed to use cassettes instead of Papameram, and who performs Papameram becomes an element in your grade. In your guru, of course, becomes that your course depends on your guru, your Papameram, and many elements that stand outside the performance of these students. And not caste alone, sometimes it gets to the realm of religion. People have problems with Muslim students performing into traditional art forms, and we have this practice of Kala Kilanam and Kala Pratibha, which is not anymore now. The highest scorer, girl scorer, individual scorer becomes Kala Kilanam, and the highest individual scorer, boy, becomes Kala Pratibha. And last time, some years back, there was this girl, Ashida Ashraf, a Muslim, who had the chance of winning Kala Kilanam, but then she did stuff. At the end, some other girl won, and there was this controversy just because she was a Muslim. And Kala Mandalam, of course, there are a lot of news like Muslim and Dalit students suffering because of their caste. Yeah.
In classical art form, Carnatic music or Hindustani, it doesn't carry a caste mark. This Carnatic music has a connection. It's dynamical, but it can claim as a secular modern music. So there's a thing like that. But in folk music, it's easily attached to caste and Dalit music. But classical music escapes that caste mark. It's not all religious mark. It doesn't have.
I don't think we have an item called folk music in our university.
No, this year they have added folk music.
How can you say that they center around that Singari or other? I think nowadays this Singari is getting more popularity, and even the temples are started now in some temples around me. For the first time I get this. There is this kind of in my place only this Singari that is only to be celebrated, and in the temple song that is also Singari that is
Yes, I usually for the past also I used to, when I worked 1 year in the business school as a teacher, the team with which I went also, I think Singari only they are performing for the past 2-3 years. And I think it's the first time I'm seeing that it is like that. Usually they perform Singari.
Did they get any top grade song. We are saying all the 19 teams performed in this last year's youth festival. All played some jazz.
So like, is there any particular caste or community in Kerala who are devoted to music? Like, in Rajasthan we have the Manganyas, and in Bengal we have the Baul. Like, is there any particular caste or community? And the second question is like, classical music is regarded as a high form of art, and whereas folk is regarded as a low form of art. Like, what was the process involved in making folk music as a, like?
It's a big topic. I have my opinion about that, but I'm not going into that. I have to admit to me the clear for
You said something about North and South division in Singhari and Singhari. Like even here, I think like there are a lot of some kind of North is actually more culturally or ideologically better than the South. So there is a popular current that is when people talking. Is there something like that even in the art form? I was quite surprised.
in Chenda and the second. It's not actually a problem of the north or south. Not basically, Thrissur is understood as the capital of cultural capital of Kerala. So north is understood as something the elite. So this is almost from the south, they are maybe from colonies. So south is not considered as
Even otherwise, culturally, Deccan, that is somebody who is from south in Kerala, is kind of a subaltern, like. I don't know, like.
In this aspect of the Chingari Melam and all the Chenda and the paraphernalia with that in big so-called feudal movies by Mammootty, Mohanlal, even Prithviraj recently happened. So we have this temple festival kind of a scenario and Chenda Melam and all kinds of things. So again, you have the so-called folk dances from Tamil Nadu and all that. So you can
actually we belong to a certain music level. It's not a community, a Pariah community playing a certain music, but this community belongs to a certain music. So the opposite happens. I think about that. We belong to a certain kind of music. So Dalits belong to folk music. The opposite happens.